Another week of Oh Ship. This week I've got my friend Marcel Fairbairn joining us. I've known Marcel for feels like donkey's years. I worked with him in one of my earlier companies, iChameleon, to help bring one of his businesses to life on the internet, which you're going to hear a lot about today. Marcel has a really fascinating origin story, starting basically as a rock and roller in the 80s, who then developed a passion for gear and concert gear and lighting, and moved on to being a multifaceted entrepreneur across multiple businesses, but probably best well known for his creation, GearSource, which he's actually approaching his 20th year of building and growing as a great company. I happen to think Marcel's a fascinating and entertaining guy who's always got a cool angle on about any subject you can think of. And you're going to get a little sample of that today as we talk about, what it means to bring a little rock and roll to the entrepreneurial world, and frankly, persistence, what it takes when you're an entrepreneur trying to go against all odds, and fight systems that may have been in place for a long time, and keep fighting the good fight for ideas that you really believe in. And that doesn't really matter whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you're a corporate exec or you're just a leader in general. This idea of powering through ideas that are really important to you and to your belief, and to opportunities that you see, is something we should all be excited about. So I think Marcel is going to be a great inspiration for you on this week's episode of Oh Ship.
Oh shit.
Oh shit, we're live. Oh, damn, I almost missed
I've
it,
never
Freddie.
actually had this happen before. The guest has just walked off before it started.
Yeah. Oh shit, we're live. Hey, Freddie, how are you? I feel like I need to straighten my glasses though.
Dude, I spend the entire show straightening my glasses.
I
This is the
I
problem with
know
these
you do.
video shows. If it
I
was
know
just an
you do.
audio podcast, we could all just do this the whole time and no one would even
Exactly.
notice. But
That's
unfortunately, we're not there.
yeah.
So,
If it makes you feel better though, I'm not wearing pants, so
I appreciate that. Yeah, so
yeah.
where are you calling in from today, Marcel?
I am, if you know Banff, Canada, I'm just outside of Banff, Canada, in another little town, and it's beautiful. I'm sitting here looking out at the mountains from my new stand-up desk. So
I
if I
like
walk
that. And
around and dance a little, that's why.
this is the first official standing desk O ship. I always sit
Ah,
for a ship. I was inspired by you standing for your desk. So if we do get a little bit of lean today or a little bit of wiggle, we're gonna be a little more loose today. So speaking
I
of
like
loose,
loose. I
yeah,
like
I
loose.
know you do. So speaking of loose, we're gonna before I get into any of more of the kind of serious interview questions I like to ask people, I want to have a little icebreaker. As a guy who I know is passionate about music, I have to ask a couple quick questions for you, and we'll see how quickly you stumble on these,
Oh,
or
great.
not. Greatest rock and roll band of all time.
Led Zeppelin.
Who's the greatest Canadian rock and roll band of all time?
Rush.
I
Ask me a
have to
tough
go.
one, will you?
Yeah, I have to go with you on that one. Who makes better rock bands? The Brits, the Americans, or Canadians?
Depends on the era. Today, I'd say it's the Americans. In the 70s and 80s, or 70s for sure, I'd say the Brits.
Yeah,
80s and 90s, I think Americans and very few Canadians. I have a
yeah,
lot of Canadian rock star
yeah,
friends
yeah.
that were very good, but on a sort of scale kind of thing, I would say probably America in the 80s and 90s. And today, I think they all make shit music for the most part. So, I mean,
Brilliant.
bad music, not shit. Sorry,
Yeah, and
ship, ship music.
who's the best live band?
Well, again, it depends on what era.
Yeah,
Pink Floyd probably overall is
yeah,
one of the best live bands. Today, I'd say it's probably Coldplay.
yeah,
Coldplay is incredible live. I think a lot of people would argue with me on that, but
yeah.
The Stones
And
are
I know
always incredible.
you are at your core, and we'll talk about this more today. You're a diehard lighting concert gears. The stage is a huge part of the production for you. So when you
Right.
say those are the best live bands, because they make the best live music, or because they got the best setups, they got the best
Well,
toys.
it's all part of it, right? Like you can't be the best live band with the worst light show.
Yeah, fair
So
enough.
Pink Floyd, it was all about the gear, and it's
Yeah,
funny because I just had a conversation yesterday with a fine gentleman named Mark Brickman, who has been Pink Floyd's lighting designer for, I think, probably 50 years. I mean,
cool.
he's done them forever. And he was the one who was responsible for that circle of lights that just kind of went like this and did a. He's done some amazing things, and he's an
Yeah,
artist now. He has a studio in Los Angeles. Um, but today again, I mean, Coldplay, their lighting designer is a woman named Suna Ruthier, and she's just an incredibly talented person. She works with Kiss, she works with the Muse, she works with a lot of bands that you'd love. And so Sooner just, first of all, designed a very good show, but you can put a really great light show behind a very boring band like a Steely Dan or someone who just stands there and or sits on chairs and performs like Genesis.
yeah,
Genesis is an incredible show, and believe me, Genesis has always been one of my favorite bands, but they're kind of past their due date at this point. So wheeling Phil Collins out in a wheelchair to sing Genesis songs just doesn't work for me, even
yeah.
though the lighting is incredible.
I suspect I'd have to have a pretty great light show.
Yeah,
That would be my thing if I was a band. So on that
yeah.
note, that
But
should
again, just to finish, if you've
yeah,
ever seen Coldplay live, or if you've never seen Coldplay live, see them because Chris Martin, the singer, just really gets the audience into it. He's such a performer and such a great guy. So
well, if anyone tuning in on the live chat at any point has a point of view on best live band, please chime in. So I wanted to start going down the more entrepreneurial side of your history, Marcel, and using that to kind of pivot into some of the big subjects I'd love to talk about today. I feel like I'm missing out by not being able to show this very fantastic photo I've been seeing glimpses of over the years. Of you sporting a very spectacular 80s long hair look. I believe in a very cool denim jacket. So
I
tell
had good hair.
you did have great hair. You know
Not so much today.
on our ship. I'm not even going to go
Yeah,
down.
yeah.
How did you get your start when you started your career before you jumped over to the kind of marketplace tech SaaS world?
Yeah. So believe it or not, it's a funny story. So um, my very first time, I was a singer to start, and my very first time was in church, and I was like 7 or 8 years old, and the priest asked if anyone had a song that they'd like to sing, and I think it was Sunday school or something. It was like before or after the church thing, the mass, and so my parents are horrified when I stand up because I'm sort of, little Johnny. I'm the class clown and stuff. So I stand up and I sing "Bottle of Wine, Fruit of the Vine," and my parents were just like, "Oh my God!"
Crawling
So
under the chair.
yeah, fast forward a few years, and I sang a lot at home in the shower, and to my family and stuff. And there was an ad up, I think, in the church for a singer for a rock band, and audition on Saturday or whatever. So I went in, I auditioned, I got the gig, and so that band rehearsed in the basement of a church, a Catholic church, and
Cool.
to pay for that rehearsal space, we did a thing every Saturday night called the Rock Mass, and it was really heavy rock music with religious lyrics.
Yeah.
And the church, which was normally pretty dead on Saturday night, was suddenly standing room of teenagers. Like it was
Oh,
packed out the door. And
yeah.
it just became this massive success. And then, of course, the bishop or the old priest who ran the church or something came in and shut us down because it was
Of course
devil's
it is.
music and all that stuff, right? So I went on. I actually, in a very entrepreneurial genius move, I quit school in the middle of 10th grade. And
This is
because I,
sarcasm if anyone's not following along.
yeah, that is sarcasm. Don't quit school in 10th grade, people. So I quit school as soon as it was on my 16th birthday. I was legally allowed to quit school, and I got fake ID and I went on the road with a rock band.
Awesome.
touring taverns and clubs in Western Canada. And I did that for a couple of years, and I realized, my pay was $200 a week, and my bar tab was 250. So the math just wasn't working for me, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't working out real well.
Fundamentals
And
and entrepreneurialism right here. Important
right,
stuff.
yeah. I
Bottom
missed
line.
the accounting class that taught me that, you should probably make more than you spend. That would be a good idea. But really, I'll tell you, this sounds crazy, but the driving sort of entrepreneurial burn in me came from wanting a Corvette.
Yeah.
I grew up poor. I grew up in a poor family in a fairly poor place. And just a Corvette to me was a pinnacle of success.
Yeah.
And so I just dreamed about a Corvette. And I think it was Tony Robbins. I listened to all of these guys when I was a kid, whether it was Napoleon Hill or Tony Robbins or Brian Tracy or whoever, motivational guys. And Tony Robbins always talked about visualizing things. So I had, a picture of a Corvette on the mirror where I brushed my teeth, and, anywhere I could put a picture of a Corvette, I had a picture of a Corvette. And so I quit touring in bands, and I got a job in a music store selling guitars to those bands that I used to tour with. And what I realized was I was a really good networker, and I was a pretty good sales guy, and I loved that side of it. I loved being sort of in business, but or in the business, but not on the stage.
Yeah.
And that was a great aha moment for me, because I know people who I knew back then who are still playing the same bars, and they're still broke, and they're still, they're having fun. They're playing music for a living. But
Hopefully, after a couple decades, you get the part where the bar tab is lower than the income, though, and that probably
yeah,
just makes perfect on that one.
well, actually, I just started drinking less.
This is
It
all
worked out. You cut your
another strategy.
expenses. You can either increase, okay, so here's a great entrepreneurial lesson. You can increase your revenue, or you can cut your expenses. Those are two
Yeah.
different ways to profitability. So quit drinking and you got the money back, right?
Yeah.
So I took this job in the music store. I got really good at it. I got offered another job. Then I got offered a partnership to go open another store in another city. Fairly quickly, I learned what it was like to be a minority partner, and that you really have very few rights and protections as a minority. I think I owned 30% or something. And so I wanted to sell out of it. I was not getting along with the founder and wanted to leave the company. And so I hired a lawyer and just said, hey, Marcel wants to leave, and he'd like to sell his shares back to you in the company. And they did everything they could to destroy my life. So that taught me a very valuable lesson at about 23 years old.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try and shorten this. So I went on to another music store later on, and they had this division that did sound and lights for nightclub installations, church installations, etc. And I went, hey, look, there's a shiny thing. I'm going to go check that out. I'm sick of selling guitars. I'm not making enough money. My Corvette that I did buy, by the way, I got a Corvette at, I think I was 18 when I got my first one.
Cool. That's
And
great.
I've had about 7 or 8 Corvettes by now, and a lot of other cars.
Yeah.
But my new Corvette at that time was a 1985 Corvette, and it was a
Yeah.
little more expensive. I needed a little more money.
Yeah.
So I went into their commercial division and really took to the lighting. And it was because I'm I have a creative mind in the back of all of this. And lighting allows you to just really create a mood and create a look and do all of these beautiful things. So I really sort of hooked into that. And that led me to a so far 30 something year career
Yeah.
in lighting at the core, but now it's more lighting, sound, video,
And
stages,
how
everything.
did you make, and just to be clear, and I'm gonna do my best to summarize this for people in the audience who may not appreciate this or understand it. When we think about all these, whether it's a touring rock band or a live event or churches or any of these types of things, there's an incredible amount of gear that is comes together to put these things, put these shows on. A large touring band, I mean, they may have 50 to 100 speakers that they're bringing around. I mean, what in five, 10, 18 wheelers if it's a big
40,
tour,
40.
40. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's my
I think the
point. Like this,
Stones might have been like 45, 50 trucks.
that's wild.
Uh,
I mean, I think a lot of,
yeah.
and you're talking, could be dozens or in even some cases hundreds of people to assemble these things
Yeah.
and disassemble them as they move them around. This is a really big deal. It's, we're talking very casually about lights, but we're talking about, in some cases, incredible amounts of infrastructure that's out there, and this stuff's really expensive.
It
These
is.
concert grade speakers, an individual speaker could be tens of thousands of dollars. So people are literally moving around, millions of dollars of gear. And so some people can afford to do that, buy this stuff new, and most bands, I'm guessing, are buying some of this stuff used, or much of it used, and potentially getting the hand-me-downs from the band that was more successful before them, that has upgraded already. So tell me how you transitioned basically from where you're at now to basically creating you weren't a tech guy, and all of a sudden you're building a technology platform. And I'd love to hear about that transition for you, because
Yeah,
that's a big shift, especially 20 years ago.
yeah, yeah. No, again, it's a great story. It's a funny story, and it was another leap of faith. I left an industry that was paying me a very good salary for a guy with ninth grade education. I was making more than all my friends who had MBAs and stuff, and so I was making really really good money. And I went to my now ex-wife, my wife at the time, and I said, "Hey, look, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to give up this big fat paycheck that I've been getting, and I'm going to figure out something to do on my own instead." I really, I was always I was a business owner inside a business that I didn't
Yeah, I
own.
understand.
And that was how I was my whole career up to that point, which was, I'm talking about 2001 right now. So
Yeah.
2001, I left a very good paying job where I owned a small piece of it. They paid me for my equity in it. Um, and I sat around by my pool for, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, figuring out what my next step was. And I had some very strict rules. One was that I have this house up at the time it was a condo, but now I have a house up in the mountains in Canada. I want to be able to be there or to be down in the Keys, and nobody knows the difference. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. So the only way I could do that was the internet, right?
Very
I
ahead
want
of
to
your
do
game on
something.
that, by the way. People are talking about that now. No one was really talking about that in
Yeah,
2001. And I'm
I
and I'm, and
was.
I'm, and I'm a hardcore internet guy, and even I wasn't
Yeah,
talking about that kind of
yeah,
stuff.
I was. So,
Yeah.
the thing was, so that was rule number one. Rule number two was I wanted to look big, even if I was sitting in my underwear in my bedroom and I was the only employee in the company. You know, I wanted it to look like and feel like a big company. So that went into some interesting phone systems, interesting ways of communicating with people, where I had 5 or 6 different departments, but all of them came to me. For accounting, press one. For sales, press two. For whatever, press three. I answered all 8 of those or whatever, right? And so it's a funny story, but I started listening to a set of CDs called "Making Money on the Internet," which was written by a guy called Seth Godin, who I'm sure many
Yeah.
people listening to this will know. And at the time, Seth was a pretty unknown guy. He had sold Yo-Yo Dine to Yahoo, and he was part of Yahoo's team doing what was called permission-based marketing. And again, this was a new thing. Now it's pretty darn common. Everything's permission-based marketing for the most part. Spam don't work anymore. And so he created this whole system around moving your business onto the internet. And so the story he told, and I forget exactly what it was, but it was something about a bird, a special bird in like Africa or something, that flies into the open mouth of a hippopotamus who's sitting in the water, vegging out. And so the bird flies in and eats all the stuff off of the hippopotamus's teeth. And the moral of the story is the bird feeds himself. The hippopotamus ends up with clean teeth. Everybody's happy, right? So his angle on that was, you have to find companies larger than your own where you can take a tiny piece from each of those companies. It's meaningless to them from an overall revenue
Mhm.
standpoint or whatever, but to you, that's your revenue.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was the foundation of what became GearSource. It was, I knew the problem. The problem was, at the time, manufacturers had this inventory that was getting pushed further and further back on the shelves as new technology was coming out. And at the time, early 2000s, automated lighting technology in particular, but audio as well, was shifting from analog to digital. But
Mhm.
it was moving very fast. So like the iPhone 1 was getting pushed back on the shelf for the iPhone 2, then it was the 2 and 1 for the iPhone 3,
Mhm.
but this inventory still existed. So
Mhm.
I wanted to solve manufacturers' inventory problems. So that's how it started. A few months in, I get a call from a lighting rental company who does concert productions, one of the largest touring lighting companies in the world. And they said, can you do the same for us? We need to get rid of our, uh, unwanted or overstock inventory. Like we go out and do the Stones, we have to buy $20 million worth of inventory for that tour. The tour ends 6 months later. Maybe we want to keep 5 million, but we want to get rid of the other 15. And although everyone in this industry knows each other, none of them were connecting in that way to sell their inventory because it was like taboo. I'm not going to sell my inventory to my competitor, but they'd let me do it. So
Mm,
this was how it started. It was a classic marketplace. I had no idea what it was called at the time. People called us a broker. I said, no, we're not a broker because we're using tools. We're using,
yeah,
a system, a process to do this. Brokers, to me were Rolodex cards where you go, yeah, I'm going to call Bob. He has one of
yeah, yeah.
those.
They call the 50 people on their list or whatever.
It's not
Yeah,
scalable. A
yeah.
brokerage isn't scalable. And I wanted something scalable. And so we were at a marketplace when even Amazon and eBay didn't call themselves marketplaces yet.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And then I met you.
Exactly. Yeah, I think we probably met what 2005.
So it's a funny story. And
Yeah,
um, I don't even remember how I found you, to be honest. I think I actually literally went to the yellow pages and looked for internet companies or something.
that's
And I
amazing.
found Martin
I don't
somehow,
remember
your
either.
ex partner.
Yeah, yeah.
But so I was using this piece of software to run GearSource up until the time you and I met. I was using this piece of software that came from England, and it was a box piece of e-commerce software when there was no Shopify, there was nothing like
Uh,
that, and it was called Actinic. I remember
yeah.
it to this day. It was garbage. It was completely horrible. And so that was my website. And we wanted to become, we wanted cloud based, we wanted all of these wonderful things. And you built us, our first
First
version of
version,
our own platform
Cold
and
Fusion.
on Cold Fusion. And I still
Yeah,
talk to you today. It's amazing, isn't it?
yeah.
You led
Hilarious.
us down a path to, you know, death by
We
paper
didn't
cuts.
know. We didn't know. No one knew.
I know, I know. At the time, it was
Oh
cutting
shit.
edge. Yeah, yeah. There's your big
Too
O ship.
funny.
We sold cold fusion to people. Yeah.
Yeah, crazy. So hey, so I'd love to ask, there's so many places we could go from this. I guess when you think about what you're building marketplaces, and for the again, if it's not clear to people, so basically you've now built a marketplace that allows people, independent people, to list their used gear, and then you help facilitate that sale. It's an open marketplace. Imagine almost like um, or comparable times to even eBay like level marketplace, but really really specific to a really
Niche.
dedicated
Yeah.
niche target, but a really compelling and interesting one. What's the
Hmm.
biggest thing you've learned over the years about building marketplaces?
Oh my
Hard one to
goodness.
nail down, I'm sure, but any
Yeah.
big
Well,
ones, you know?
you hit me with the biggest thing because otherwise I'd give
Mm,
you a laundry list of the things that
yeah,
I've learned. But there's a couple big ones. One is don't ignore the technology. Technology becomes very important to
mm,
my business, and we always thought we had cutting edge technology, and we hung on to it too long because cutting edge technology was coming in behind it,
mm,
and which explains we're in a replatforming again today,
yeah.
right now, even though we did one with your team
Three,
just a
three,
couple of years
literally
ago.
2 years ago or something. It's
What
crazy.
what was available on the market 2 or 3 years ago, uh,
Yeah,
or what wasn't available is today.
yeah.
So this is the pace of technology. So don't ignore
Mm,
technology. In fact, embrace it and make it a big part of what you do.
mm,
However, focus on the customer, focus on the
mm,
user, focus like in such a crazy maniacal way
mm,
on the user experience and the customer and the seller on your site. Don't take advantage of them because they'll
mm,
find a different way to sell their product or to buy their product. And
mm,
so I've always, even though we've not always done the best job of taking care of our customers,
mm,
I've always believed that that's very much the most important thing is to respect them, treat them with love and respect, and do your very best to make it a great user
mm.
experience.
You mentioned on your, obviously, even though I've known you forever and like so you're a great old friend, I still like to prepare for a ship and go dig in. Like, sometimes when you know someone so well, you don't always look at the details of their professional
Yeah.
life. And so I was looking at your LinkedIn, and one of the things you said on there that really caught my eye was you said something to the effect of several times in your life you've put everything on the line to prove your methods. Are you open to talking a little bit about what that means?
Of course, yeah. I mean, one thing you'll know about me, Freddie, is I'm completely transparent. So nothing is sort of off or
Okay,
closed or secret.
awesome.
Um, again, I quit a job
Do we
that
need to
paid
get a
me a
tissue
huge.
box or anything first, or
No,
we
no,
say
I'm good.
we're good?
I've
Okay.
I've I've seen I've seeked professional help, and I'm okay now. No, I mean, first um, quitting a job. I mean, first leaving school in the 10th grade and going on the road with a rock band because I wanted to pursue music, and then leaving the rock band because I wanted to pursue business, and then
Yeah.
leaving Canada because I felt like I was a big fish in a small pond. I know that sounds very
Yeah.
egotistical, but
Mm,
Canada just didn't feel big enough to me at the time. It
yeah.
felt it felt small, and it felt like I already knew all the people that I needed to know
Mhm,
there, and they weren't getting me anywhere. So I wanted to
mhm,
go further. So I
mhm,
dove into Chicago, which was an incredibly tough place to dive into when I'd never even
mhm,
really been there. And
mhm,
so that was really sort of the early stage stuff. But then um, quitting a very good paying job and going and starting
mhm,
GearSource with essentially, I think I had a couple $100,000, from selling my shares in the previous business and just from
mhm.
savings and stuff. Plus, I had a line of credit on my house. I had a second
Been
mortgage on my
there.
house,
Been
and
there.
so I basically went all in, everything I had. And I just said to my wife at the time, I said, look, I'm going to try this for 6 months. And then I'm going to I'm going to look backwards and see, did I just spend all the money and nothing's happening? Or does this show a glimmer of light? I looked at it in 6 months. I looked at it again in another 6 months. We were profitable fairly quickly. I think in 12 months, I started taking a salary out of the business, which was
Mhm,
pretty incredible.
mhm,
And I replaced my salary in about 18 months that I was making
mhm,
from the big company
mhm,
before. So, I mean, every step of the way, I'm all in. And to me, that's sort of the epitome of an entrepreneur is
mhm,
you don't go, well, I'm going to put this money over here for safety and security, and I'm going to
mhm,
put this money over here to build my business. It's all one
mhm,
pile, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to make this work because I believe in what I'm doing.
mhm,
And that to me is really the foundation of like I know so many people who call themselves entrepreneurs, but they're still collecting a paycheck from a job.
mhm,
They work 4 hours a day on this part-time business that they're putting
mhm,
together. They
mhm.
sleep well every night. They drive a fancy
I
car.
love that you
you
make
know
that one of the criteria for being on film. Like, oh, you sleep well? You're a
yeah,
fraud.
yeah, you're a fake and a
Oh,
phony.
enjoy your
No,
8 hours of peaceful
it's
sleep. You're not a
but
real
it's true.
entrepreneur.
It's true. I mean, even Gary Vee one time, I remember him interviewing somebody who said, oh, I'm a full on entrepreneur and blah, blah, blah. And he said, are you willing to forego sleep? And the guy goes, hell no. And he goes, then you're not an entrepreneur.
Yeah,
And I mean, I've slept on my office floor. I've slept on
been
couches. I've,
there.
I've slept in all
Yeah,
kinds of crazy places because you got to get the job done, right? You
yeah.
got to do what it takes. So, most days I wake up wishing I wasn't an entrepreneur because it's much more peaceful. I see all these
Yeah,
people enjoying their families on
yeah,
vacations and doing these wonderful things together. I can't relax. I just
yeah.
can't. I'm just constantly so driven. So
It's a tricky thing that a lot of people can't quite wrap their heads around. How hard it can be an entrepreneur sometimes, and I feel like when you go into entrepreneurial ventures, um, sometimes you can feel like everything is all odds are against you. Have you ever felt like that in any of the ventures you've done?
almost every day. I mean,
Yeah.
literally, it's like, and you can't be sad by that because your job
Hmm.
as an entrepreneur and a CEO of an entrepreneurial company is
Hmm.
not to count the money. It's to fix the problems. We are janitors of
Hmm.
businesses. We're there to clean up and fix problems and to
Yeah.
have the ideas that are going to continue to drive the company forward and we're going to keep the company from dying, you
Yeah.
know? So it's almost like being a parent. Like your
Yeah.
job is not to tell them what to do every day. It's to basically coach them so that they don't kill themselves or burn in a fire when they keep touching the stove or whatever it is, you know. It's just to keep them alive, really. So
So, you know, you've got a clearly got a really great energy about you, and you know, I've known that from my long history with you, but I think anyone watching can see you've got, you know, you have a lot of fun with what you do. You
yes,
know, going into something when all odds are stacked against you may not seem like the most prudent idea. When you come up with a new entrepreneurial idea and you start it, do you go into it knowing full well things are stacked against you, or do you feel like you're optimistic at the beginning and then you get like 6 months in, you're like, well, this is harder. This is harder
yeah.
than expected. You know, so is there like a little bit of like, and I mean this in a healthy way, like there's blind optimism that comes along with being an entrepreneur where you jump into it and then you go, oh shit. Or are you like, are you fully braced for oh shit, you know,
You,
knowingly
you,
day one? Does that make
it's
sense?
it's it's an incredible question because honestly, it's a weird balance. Like, you know, I you obviously start out with big ambitions and big
Yeah,
goals, but I'm never unrealistic. I start out typically thinking I'm going to go broke.
yeah,
And, you know, I think I'm going to lose everything on this and prove me wrong. You know,
yeah,
world, prove me wrong. And, you know, you get a lot of punches in the face along the way. Some good things typically happen if you've got a good idea, and not every
yeah,
idea is good. I've looked at some entrepreneurial businesses and gone, you know, that guy's an idiot. I'm sorry, you're going to lose everything. You know, by my house, there used to be this restaurant, and it was terrible, and they went out of business after a couple of years. And then another restaurant opened in there. And I'm like, what is that guy thinking? You know, that was
yeah.
a terrible restaurant. It's a bad location. It's got bad mojo.
And
That
someone else
restaurant
did
went
it.
out of
I feel
business. And
like
about five restaurants went out of business over a couple of years in that same location. Sometimes it's just a bad idea, you know?
yeah, yeah. So I feel like another way I could have phrased that question a moment ago was effectively, and I mean this by the way to myself as well. So I'm not saying this in any kind of rude way, but it's like, how stupid are you, basically? Because I like for me, I get so excited about stuff sometimes. I wish actually I was a little more conservative like you are. I tend to be like, I can conquer this, and this is like the classic, you know, entrepreneurial journey, and then I have that panic moment of going, yeah, there maybe this is a little crazier than I thought. I tend to, you know, I always work my
I
way
remember your
through.
TV thing. I remember
Yeah,
your
yeah.
TV thing. You
Oh
know, it's
yeah,
the one
exactly.
idea that you pitched to me that A, I didn't get, B,
Yeah,
I wasn't fully on board with.
yeah.
And you're probably going to sit here and argue today that it was an
No, no,
incredible
no.
idea and it would have worked and it was going to work and it would
Yeah.
work today and all that stuff. But it
No, no,
just
no.
didn't.
I described Guide as like it was like the ugly sweater that I wish more people told me I was wearing, and I didn't get it. But you know, a lot
Yeah.
of people told me that they basically they're like, well, they're Freddie, like you know, you're so energetic about stuff that so I just thought maybe I didn't get it, and then
Well,
they considered it.
it's a very valid point, Freddie,
Yeah,
and this is a point that I would like to make that's very much on topic here. So,
yeah.
you have to have people who you trust to tell you when you're being stupid, and there's very few people for you and for me who we trust that much because
Mm-hmm.
generally, and this is going to sound very egotistical, but
Mm-hmm.
generally, you walk into a meeting, you're hoping you're not the smartest person in the meeting, but most
Mm-hmm.
days you probably are,
Mm-hmm.
and so you listen to all of those ideas and you're hoping that there's one better than the one that you've already got in your head. So it's
On your go
hard when
fish,
you're,
you're like, I got some ideas. I'll take another
yeah,
one out of the pot. Thank you.
yeah. No, it's tough because, you know, again, when you're a very strong-willed entrepreneur who happens to be smart as well, it's hard to find people that you trust enough to tell you when you're going down a deadly
Mm-hmm.
path. And
Mm-hmm.
I can say there's very few people, you're probably one of them. There's very few people in my life who I would listen to that told me, don't do what you're doing, please. Don't do it. It's wrong. It's going to fail, you know?
Well,
And
anyone
that's a
out
good thing,
there,
by the way.
yeah, anyone out there watching this, whether it's live or later, if you hear me say an idea that you think I shouldn't do, please, dear God, tell me. So, yeah,
Yeah.
so
Well,
we
and you know, be willing to listen too, Freddie. You know,
yeah,
because
yeah,
that's the hard part. You know, you're
yeah,
smarter than me. If I tell you not to
yeah,
do
yeah,
something, you have to be willing to listen based
yeah.
on whatever experience I'm bringing to the table. But you know, when you came to me with Chameleon Collective, I just remember sitting back and going, what a friggin' brilliant idea. What a great idea.
Thanks,
And I
man.
think I immediately pitched you on, you need me in this company
Yeah,
somehow.
yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
you got to get me into this thing. Do you need a guy with no education, you know, some really great ideas, but no structure? You
Remember,
know,
that's not what it
I'm
was. It
that
was the
guy.
Canadian. It was the Canadian thing that disqualified you. You won't have any
Yeah, I
filthy
understand.
Canadians
I
in Canadian
understand. I
practice.
understand. Yeah,
Totally
we're,
kidding.
yeah,
So there's a old joke aside. There's a really I think another is like sub theme I'm hearing here, and it's about persistence. And I think when you take some of these ideas, there's the ideas that people should avoid, but then there's other ones you mentioned, like when you made that big leap. It took you 18 months, which again I agree was really fast to kind of get back to where you were before. But the point is, there's no, it's very rarely is it like a lottery where it's like you just make the flip and then you get gifted with this wonderful replacement.
very
There's
rare.
a period of it's hard and you're going to have to take a dip and you're going to have to make a sacrifice, an investment, even if it's not an investment of cash, it might be reduced income and time. So tell me what persistence means to you though.
Well, you know, there just is no other option, right? Like I
Yeah.
don't walk into any day in my work thinking, well, if it doesn't work out, we can just go backwards. You know, that
Mhm.
it's just not an option. Death is not an option. Not solving this problem is not an option. But, you know, I mean, there's been times like, so I was doing wonderfully well. I used money from GearSource to fund another business along the way, which, you know, I can now tell you was a big mistake.
Mhm.
Um, but I was doing really well. We were growing. We were growing. I was forecasting incredibly accurately our
Mhm.
growth and our profitability. And all of a sudden, this section between 2008 and 2012 happened, which had a mega impact on my industry.
Mhm.
You know, entertainment dollars were one of the first things to not be spent. So, you know, people were cutting back their spending on buying concert tickets or going to nightclubs or whatever it was. That caused an impact to my industry, who stopped buying things. And really, it became a supply issue as much as anything, because they were hoarding their old equipment and they weren't buying new equipment. So when they start hoarding old equipment, I don't have any supply to sell to the rest of the world. So that was my first major education as a CEO, not as an entrepreneur, but as a CEO. I was not prepared for it. For the very first time, I think it was 2010 or 11, I lost about $600,000. That was a
Mhm.
big loss for my
Yeah.
company. For any company, you know, a loss is a loss, but I lost about 600 grand. It took me a while to cover that loss. It probably
Mhm.
took me 3, 4, 5 years to
Mhm.
really get out of that
Okay.
loop.
Mhm.
And it caused all kinds of impact throughout my business. It caused
Mhm.
some ripples into our sellers, into our customers. I never
Mhm.
want to do that again. And then all of a
Mhm.
sudden, 2020 hits, and there's another similar situation where, you know, I have friends who have nightclubs or restaurants, um, all kinds of different businesses, and they were like, "Oh my God, my sales went down by 30% or 50%." You know, hold my beer.
Yeah.
You know, there were no live events,
Yeah.
zero, for
Nothing.
about 18 months. You know,
Brutal.
so but you know, that opened up all kinds of great
Mhm.
opportunities and
Mhm.
great ideas, and it changed my way of thinking. You know, you were there. We actually went more all in, and I don't even remember your original question at this point,
Mhm.
but we decided to reinvest. You know, the world gave.
Persistence when you're on track. So keep going.
Yeah, I mean, the world said, "Hey, here's some great low interest long term loans. You can get money to survive and to save your business." I took the money and reinvented my business and went fully into the marketplace world,
Yeah.
because we always kind of dabbled in marketplace, but we were still a bit of a buy sell kind of company. We went fully into marketplace, where our only income is the fees generated between a buyer and a seller. Um, and now we're even going deeper in that direction with our new replatform. So, you know, persistence is having, to me, it's having a clear enough vision
Mhm.
that little punches in the side of your head don't knock you off course. You know, you
Mhm.
just keep going in that
Mhm.
direction.
I, I, I,
And
want, I, want, I want to ask you one last question that's tied to this, and I think this could be good advice out there. And I don't want to project too much of myself in this, so if this doesn't make sense for you, feel free to let me know. Is there a fine line between obsession and persistence? And I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs who you know what I mean, like like the obsession. Well, I'm gonna ask you that. What's that line between being obsessively focused versus persistence in being an
Yeah.
entrepreneur?
So first, before I answer that, Robert actually made a really great comment on your comments here, and he
Mhm,
said you can't trust friends and family to give you to tell you it's a bad idea, and
mhm,
that's so true because your friends and family are there to catch you when you fall and to make sure you're safe and protected and all of those things.
mhm,
Entrepreneurialism is not safe and protected. So the obsession thing, it's such a really good question because to
mhm,
me, obsession could lead to like arrogance or
mhm,
and arrogance is very different than persistence because you can be persistent but still smart enough to watch for the signs and still smart enough to read articles every morning. Like I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I wait the half hour that we're supposed to wait before grabbing my cell phone and stuff. I try to find the time to do at least 10 minutes of meditation. But then I dive in and I go to LinkedIn, I go to anywhere. If people have sent me articles overnight, I read them.
mhm,
I'm constantly learning and taking on information because I'm watching for the bumps in the road ahead. I'm
mhm,
watching for the punches in the face. I'm
mhm,
watching. So I think if you become too obsessed with your idea, you are bordering on arrogance and you're
mhm,
probably ignoring the signs at that point.
mhm.
So, yeah, I mean, obsession is not, to me, obsession is a unhealthy word.
I agree.
Obsession,
Yeah, and I think
obsession leads to crazy
I,
things.
yeah, I see a lot. I see a lot of that. It's good. There's something. It's a very fine line, right? Where you
It is.
deep and bordering on fanatical passion for something is something I love in other entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
But obsession puts blinders on. You
Such
know?
an amazing point. Such an
Yeah,
amazing point. And
yeah,
it's the same in personal relationships, by the
yeah,
way.
yeah.
Having a good, healthy relationship is great and loving your spouse and loving your other half or whatever. But if you become obsessed with that person, you're choking them, you're probably destroying their life and yours at the same
Mhm,
time.
mhm,
That's a problem. There always
mhm.
has to be some sort of a healthy balance, I think.
Yeah, so true. Well, I think that was
Yeah,
a really great high note to end this week's episode on. Marcel, first of all, you and I could talk for 10 hours. I had 20
we
more
could.
questions lined up. We literally could have made that a 3-hour episode without
Yes,
blinking.
we could. Let's do it
And
again
so,
someday.
yeah, so it's a great excuse to have you back on. And I just want to thank you for your time and sharing so much great wisdom with our audience. Is there any shout outs for places that people should look for you?
Well, my company, GearSource.com, but that's obviously for people who are in the industry. We don't sell to mom
It's
and
cool
pop
though.
or to
Honestly,
Mr.
if you even
Audio Advocate.
yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I like gadgets. So for me, just looking at all these giant like systems, I totally geek out
yeah,
on personally. Even if I'm not in the biz, it's some cool stuff. You don't even realize
yeah,
what powers these huge. If you like
yeah.
music, I actually
It's
recommend you
fun.
go check your source out.
But, Instagram, Marcel Fairbairn, LinkedIn, Marcel Fairbairn, Facebook, you'll get sick of me bragging about my son racing and stuff, but Facebook, Marcel Fairbairn. I have a unique enough name that you can find me everywhere. So,
Awesome,
yeah.
awesome. Well,
Thank
again,
you
thank
so much,
you.
Freddie. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. And for those of you listening, whether you're watching live or you're tuning in on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, or any of the other platforms that you're listening via our audio podcast across Spotify, Google, Apple, any of the platforms that we're streaming, thank you again for subscribing and listening to OSHIP. Please continue to support the show by tuning in every single week. And if you're feeling inspired, please share it with a friend, share it with an episode you're passionate about. Tell your friends about it, and if nothing else, please give us a like, thumbs up, just let us know how we're doing. So thank you again for your time, Marcel. Thank you again for being here today, and we'll catch you next week on OSHIP.
Thanks, Freddie.